All right, well, it is time, so I'll go ahead and get started. Thanks everyone for being here today. My name is Amanda Onmacht, and I am part of the Farmer Services team at Organic Farmers Association. And so today we'll be discussing pesticide drift, and we'll hear firsthand encounters from two farmers today. So next slide. So for the agenda today, we'll give an overview of Organic Farmers Association. We'll then hear from farmers Jared Lukens-Black of Budding Moon Farm and Angela Jackson Pulse of Prairiesun Organic Farm. There will be time at the end for questions and a discussion. So you're welcome to put your questions in the chat and we'll leave time to answer those at the end. This presentation will also be recorded, so everyone who registered today will get a copy of that recording as soon as we process it, and it will be posted to our YouTube channel as well. All right, so who is OFA? We are farmers. So OFA is a membership-based organization with the mission to provide a strong and unified national voice for domestic certified organic producers. OFA aims to build and support a farmer-led national organic farmer movement and national policy platform. And we do that by developing and advocating for policies that benefit organic farmers, strengthening and supporting the capacity of organic farmers and organizations, and supporting collaboration and leadership among state, regional, and national organic farmer organizations. Next slide. So among the resources we offer, we have farmer work groups. So these are virtual meeting spaces where we come together to talk about problems and sector-specific commodity groups and come together to create farmer-directed solutions, as well as inform OFA policy positions. So we have a number of work groups available from crop insurance, dairy, grain growers, public procurement, and mixed vegetable growers. So if you're interested, we'd love to have you join us. You can scan that QR code to submit an interest form or find more information at our website. We also host the National Organic Farmer Education Network. So this is a search resource where you can find more organic educational events from conferences and workshops. So it's a really great resource. If you're interested in learning more, I encourage you to check that out. You can scan that QR code or again, visit our website. All right, and now moving on to our speakers. We're so grateful to have you today, Angela and Jared. Thank you for joining us. So Jared is from Budding Moon Farm in Spearfish, South Dakota, and Angela Jackson Pulse is joining us from Vermilion, South Dakota, and is co-operator of Prairiesun Organic Farm. And with that, I will pass the presentation over to you, Jared.
Thanks, Amanda. Yeah, I'm Jared Lukens-Black, and I own and operate Budding Moon Farm in Spearfish, South Dakota. Go to the next slide. Got a couple details. It's a mixed vegetable on mostly, and then a few fruits farm, small orchard. I sell 100% directly to customers. So going through CSAs, and then also part of that CSA is a prescription produce program. The organic and uh, drift issues are really important to me just because of that personal connection to customers. That I wasn't originally certified organic, partially because I just didn't go through the steps and was going direct to consumers, and so I had a relationship where almost everyone saw my farm, saw the operation, what was happening, or knew me personally. But I've always felt that just having someone else in that organic certification back you up is really important to have to be able to fall back and say, don't just take my word for it, take my certifier's word for it, take um, uh, all the backing of it. So I did experience drift on a farm, as it says right there, in early August of 21, which is, if you're a vegetable grower, that is right when the peak's just about hitting here in Western South Dakota. So lost majority of the crop for the year with that. Hadn't, early June and July is not the peak uh, value production time of the year in our area. Next slide. So the drift on our farm was actually committed by the county. They were spraying our, I'd almost never imagined that could be drifted on our location. I'd been passionate about the issue for a long time and was registered on Drift Watch and had kind of been active in trying to communicate with legislators about issues adrift in the state, but in the area I'm in, it's primarily cattle ranching, not row crops. The exact location I'm in is very far removed from most agriculture, except for a few hobby horse farms. Um, and so it really was surprising to me that it happened. But it's a road, and they were spraying heavy along the ditches, and chemical combination they were used. It wasn't even just um, things that were there's allowable or considered safe amounts for human consumption. They were a couple of chemicals that are used primarily on rangeland where there's restrictions for not even being able to move the cattle off that land for a certain amount of time, and not being able to move the forage off the land. So it was a big learning curve for me about what chemicals were even out there or being used. Like I said, our location's a little bit unique. We're in a gulch, and so that creates prime conditions for drift with inversions, weird wind patterns that don't match up with what forecasts are. So even though the forecast for the day would have been, quote, considered fine for spraying in our exact location, it was not, to say the least. And it's just a really important thing to be aware of is just how topography and those microclimate conditions can impact what's happening. And not all sprayers, even if they want to be aware, understand that. If you don't live in those microclimates, your farm is different than everybody else's farm, even just a mile down the road. Um, so I contacted the county immediately after it happened, and then contacted the state Department of Agriculture to report it, and they came to do testing. I ended up discovering that there were problems with that, so they had left the test for a number of days without ever submitting it. So the date that they took it from the samples of uh, vegetation from my farm to when it actually arrived at the lab was quite a lag time, which can have a lot of effects on the outcomes of the tests, the concentrations, given how short the half-life is of those chemicals. The damage has been done to the plants, but those chemicals start to become undetectable pretty quickly. So I did some of my own testing as well to get it sent in and shipped appropriately, shipping it on ice, shipping it um, overnight instead of just having a long delay. Um, to cut to the end of it, our claim was refused, so the county was insured. So I was dealing with their insurance company. Um, uh, we it was denied, even though tests came back showing detectable levels of one of the herbicides used, and no other neighbors had been using that same herbicide, so there was no dispute about where it came from at all. I ended up getting legal help because I couldn't, I just couldn't believe, I thought, okay, well, maybe they just aren't taking me seriously. They think they can just wait me out. I got legal help. He said I had basically made the case for him, so it was really, really easy. And kind of went through that long process. I could go into it in more detail with the back and forth. But essentially, they kept denying the claim. And uh, the lawyer I was working with, he was really, really nice. And but he said, your county is just about the richest county in the state because it's the one where gambling is legalized. So they're pretty wealthy, so their pocketbooks are endless, and they have a history of fighting litigation to the state Supreme Court. And he said, you're working with a large insurance company that if they give into one claim on this, they're worried that they're going to start opening themselves up to a lot of other claims looking to your case to settle. And so he said you would have to go to the absolute end, and hour for hour, that's just going to cost you a lot of money. He said it's up to you. I can't tell you, but it was going to be cost more than what I had lost, which was still a hard decision because it was the principal for me. It was wondering, was it worth it to keep going? But in the end, we just said it can't put those tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars into uh, fighting this, which was really sad and really hard to swallow. Um, and then again, given the persistent nature of some of those herbicides, pulled everything that we could out of the farm, just took loads of it to the dump. The local dump, they accepted it, even with the contamination. Didn't pull all the orchard trees, but continued to see the effects on them because I planted a couple trees following those, and I could see the stunting um, kind of persist for a couple of years. And it seemed like just this last year, 25, seemed like finally had a normal growth year on those trees that were there. I could go to the next slide. So these next couple slides are just a couple of pictures that I snapped. It's one of the lucks about having phones out there. So they're kind of a couple days. So this was, I think, maybe an hour after. I could go to the next slide. And then I think they kind of go to a couple days after. Next ones here kind of show the just explosive reproductive growth that was caused in most of these fruiting plants I would kind of learned about one of the chemicals essentially just makes them go into excessive reproduction mode until they reproduce until they die, kind of overloading the system there. Go to the next slide. The final thing, just I had tons of pictures showing the evidence, and you know, they fought against it constantly. I don't know what evidence is enough, frankly, to prove it. I they were going at it with everything with me, but one thing to know for sure is if you are worried that you're in this situation, pictures will not be enough at all to make your case. There's a lot of holes they can poke in that for sure. Poking holes, that some mineral nutrient deficiencies might cause some of these same looks. The extremity to which it causes them is doubtful, so they'll call into question your growing practices. They'll call into question your neighbors and what your neighbors are doing and what they're spraying. And so you really do have to have as much data as possible about what you're doing, what your neighbors are doing, weather conditions. Really, the more you have, if you're considering uh, protecting yourself or fighting an incident, uh, the more you have, the better. Next slide. But the biggest advice I could give would be to have a plan before it happens. Really, it's kind of like a emergency preparedness for your household. What are you going to do in a worst case scenario? And it for sure was a whole new realm for me, an area I had no clue about. I think one of the questions to ask yourself first would be, would you pursue damages or not? Uh, Depends on obviously probably the scope of your operation and what happened. But just to kind of know and have an idea of what getting into back and forth would be. Definitely had our names drug through the mud in the community. Stories told about us behind our backs that aren't true. And so you don't necessarily make friends by pushing back against what some people think is just normal or the price of doing business or that you shouldn't be doing this the weird organic way. Um, One of the most important things is having a relationship with your neighbors. Even, before this time, I had a great relationship, but since it and after our neighbors knew what happened to us, anytime anybody sees the county out spraying within a couple miles of us, even if it's not on the same road, I start getting calls and texts just for heads up or people saying they're talking to them to watch out. And then, continued communication with anyone. I try to figure out who could possibly be spraying. And like I said, in my area, it's a lot of rangeland. So contacting the Forest Service, anybody they might be contracting with the county, I contact them every year. Um, and then if you think you would want to pursue damages or if you're worried that this would happen to you, there's a lot riskier areas I'd say to be growing than I'm in. To figure out almost have a walkthrough of what would happen. Imagine yourself being sprayed on. Where do you go to get independent tests done? Who's an independent agronomist you could contact? So they're not going to say they're biased when they were contaminating samples when they took them. Um, Figure out who to contact, perhaps your local university extension services. I contacted the State Department of Health to, get their expert advice on could anything even be sold if there was a risk of contamination. Um, and then just having a general idea of where some of the up-to-date research is on how some of these chemicals act, how they perform in different environments, different climates, and just kind of having an idea of where to go to before it happens. And then, one of the more important things I learned is having detailed weather recordings. A lot of people that are spraying, they're supposed to keep their own logs, but um, handwritten logs, not digital recording stuff is acceptable. So it's trusting the word of who the applicator is, but having your own uh, digital weather recording stations, I'd say is really important, especially with the differences in those microclimates, just how down one little gully, the wind current can be way different than it is up on top of a plateau or something like that, or the time of day with those temperature inversions. And then, signage register. Like I said, I was registered with Driftwatch. The applicator was registered, so they should have known that I existed there. Um, but it's just trying to do all these things preventatively because it my experience was after the fact it happened, even with open shut seeming case, it didn't work out. And then if you think about legal help, looking ahead of time to see who would be willing to work with you. We had chased down a lot of leads, and a lot of people didn't want to touch it locally. In these small towns, they have friends and relationships, perhaps even legitimate conflicts of interest with having done business with other people. But figuring out someone you can go to ahead of time if that is of interest to you. Um, that might be the end of my slides. I'm not sure. You could go to the next one, I think. Yeah. Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing, Jared. Appreciate it. Now we'll
Anyone has questions, they can
yeah.
put in the chat.
Yeah, please feel free. I know we had some people join later, so if you have any questions, feel free to put those in the chat and we'll have time at the end to answer those. So we're doing great on time, so I'll hand it over to you, Angela.
Thank you. Um, so I am Angela with Prairiesun Organic Farm. We are located in Vermilion, South Dakota, which is in the extreme southeast corner of South Dakota. You can practically see Iowa and Nebraska from where I'm at. We are situated between the Vermilion River and the Great Missouri River, kind of like right between the two. And this is a picture of me standing in one of our organic soybean fields. I think this picture was taken about a year before our spray incident. So next slide, please. All right, so we became famous in a way you don't want to ever become famous. We had a really serious pesticide drift case in Clay County. We had been certified organic with MOSA since 2010. We also had an FSA microloan for a poultry slaughter plant that we put up in 2016. So we do on-farm poultry processing, and we do row crops, fruits, vegetables, forage, cattle, and poultry. So we have a very diversified operation. My husband is retired, and so the farm is his part of our main income, and I work off farm. And of course, we have a lot of grandkids on the farm, so it's important for us to not only do we're organic because we also eat organic. I mean, we truly walk it out that we want to have a holistic lifestyle that really mirrors the food we're trying to grow for other people, and that we walk it out ourselves. We are very close to the city of Vermilion. Our farm sits right on the joint jurisdiction line between the city of Vermilion and Clay County. So we're literally 5 minutes from pretty much the university is a 5-minute drive. So we're super close. And our operation is about 20 acres total. We have about 2.5 more that's in transition to organic. So next slide. So just kind of some high level points about our drift case. We actually had 2 incidences. We had one in July of 2017 with an aerial spray application, and another one in July 2018 with a ground sprayer. So we had a whole wide range of chemical profiles that happened in 2017: insecticides, fungicides, and herbicides, with a custom mix with a lot of surfactants added in. Surfactants are things that cause the insecticides and fungicides to stick to the plant, so that it is like glue, and it gets everywhere when it's sprayed. It just sticks to everything. So that kind of added a little bit of a more complex situation to ours. And then we also did have an inversion experience in July of 2017, which intensified that experience. Now, you see that picture to the right, those are dead honeybees. In our case, we had hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dead honeybees within a 1-mile radius of our farm. Every beekeeper had a 90% death loss. This goes to show you like the evidence of how deep it was. So all those bees were tested, and they matched the chemical mix that was sprayed that day. So not only did we have plants that tested positive, but we had dead insects and also dead animals. We had lots of things affected by this. And I'll talk, if I have time, a little more about that impact in a moment. But we lost our organic certification on all our affected parcels. We were issued a major noncompliance from MOSA for being above the NOP allowed threshold for residues. We had physical injuries to animals, plant injuries. We had dead pollinators and honeybees. We had sickened animals, and quite a bit of financial loss. But the suffering to the animals was the worst part. That was very painful for us to be told that we have to move all of our animals and all of our livestock off the farm, that nothing could enter the affected area for up to 90 days. So we had to really move quickly to get everything moved out of the affected areas as quickly as possible, and just to remove everything. Everything had to be destroyed. All of our neighbors' gardens, including ours, we were not able to eat anything from them in 2017 and 2018, so they all had to be destroyed. It wasn't just our farm that was affected. Heike's farm was affected about 1 mile from us, as well as all of our neighbors. So we would call this a neighborhood situation. due to the nature of the event in 2017, which was the greater impact of the two. Next slide. So how did we respond? This is where a lot of people ask me, like, how did you end up there, dealing with this? Well, it just happened to be that I am a trained organic inspector and lead auditor. So that was the first mistake. Number two, my husband is a former police officer, police chief, and FBI trained investigator. So immediately, me being with my background in organic auditing and inspecting and understanding and knowing the law, and him also understanding how to handle criminal cases, we handled this like a criminal case because it really was. They violated the law, and the label is the law. And so they violated the law, so we treated it like we would any criminal case, and we started collecting documentation, pictures, interviews, notification to authorities. We involved everybody you could imagine, from the EPA to the FDA to the state of South Dakota. And we did an incredible job preserving evidence at the scene, and making sure that it was that all the evidence was preserved so that when the authorities came in, they could do what they need to do, which is to collect the evidence. The other thing is that as this unfolded and everybody was denying any wrongdoing, which is what we heard in Jared's case, same thing happened with us. Everybody denied any wrongdoing. Well, we knew that there was wrongdoing, and everybody in our neighborhood knew that there was wrongdoing. And so we went public with our story. We did a story with KELOLAND News. We went national. We started sharing our story everywhere. We did presentations, we did this chemical trespass publication, which was shared with all of our state lawmakers. Like Jared, we went to the state legislature 3 years in a row and drafted legislation to prevent this from happening to anybody in the future. That didn't really go anywhere. I did fly to Denver and meet with the EPA, and went through our situation and story with them because of the magnitude of the losses. And then we published this chemical trespass report, which I'm hoping to write a book from this, just because it's so much data. It's a very large publication, and I don't have it in a form yet to publish, but I have shared it with a few people. But it needs to be. I have added a lot more to it than the copy that I sent to OFA. So I'd like to just make it full circle, and provide this for other people who have maybe don't know what to do or how to respond. We did file a legal complaint. We retained a law firm, and we did receive compensation for our losses and injuries, but it did take 5 years. And if anybody, people who know me know that I'm a firecracker and I don't give up. And I pressed and I pressed, and I didn't let money stand in the way of making this happen. I knew that it was important enough that if somebody didn't stand up and take this on and press forward, that it was going to be a real big loss for all organic producers in South Dakota. So I always kind of took the stance that I wasn't just doing this for me. I was doing it for all of us. And I think that they saw my persistence, and I just persisted, and I never took no for an answer. And whenever somebody told me no, I would just say, well, how can I turn that into a yes? And so I was very instrumental in ensuring that our case moved forward and that we were successful in being compensated for our losses. The next slide. So I want to talk about some lessons learned in our case. Number one, persistence pays off. Be patient, be diligent, be prudent, and be resilient. These things take a long time. As you heard from Jared, they're very expensive, and not everybody has the money to fight it. People ask us, well, what did we do? I mean, I'll be honest, we sold equipment, we borrowed money, we started, a GoFundMe. We did all the above, and to raise the money to be able to keep this going. The applicators and the farmers, just one thing to be cognizant of: just because they have insurance doesn't mean it's adequate. They can be non-insured or underinsured, and was a problem in our case. Both were true. So what happens when a farmer is underinsured? Well, they have to find the money some way, right? So if they're non-insured, such as spray applicators in South Dakota, aren't required to carry insurance. So if they're non-insured, that's a real huge liability on them. They're going to end up losing their business. But I don't, it could be that some are flying with that aren't insured, although I don't recommend that. And there were some other technical things about our case, and the Germinator did a really great story. If anyone on this wants to go back and look at the Germinator story, they did a nice job writing it up. There was just so many things wrong that we uncovered in our case, which some things led to changes in South Dakota for the better, and some led to changes in South Dakota that were not for the better. And so we ended up having to deal with that backlash, as Jared put forth. There was a lot of backlash. People didn't like what we were doing, but we pushed forward. So like Jared said, preservation of evidence. Do not delete or move original photos or videos from your device. Whatever device that you use to take those photos, you do not move them or delete them. We made a huge mistake of moving those photos onto Google Drive, and then we had to have all of them sent to forensic analysis to make sure they weren't AI photoshopped. So yeah, they're going to take your phone. They can subpoena your phone. They will subpoena your camera. They will subpoena whatever. And so just be aware of that. And then take your own plant samples and freeze them. So we did. We took our plant samples, I believe right after the event occurred, we took samples and put them in the freezer. And then the state came out the next day and took samples and put them and then sent them out to be analyzed. And our certifier came out and took samples and had them analyzed. So we had 3 different sample sets, powerful, and they all matched. They all matched, all 3. And so though that profile was was also partly conclusive. Plus the state apiary person, I don't know who, can't remember his name now, but our state apiarist came out and took samples of the dead bees, and those also matched. All the dead bees matched the chemicals that were sprayed that day. So we have a lot of correlational evidence. And of course, notification within 24 hours is like ideal. Notifying in South Dakota, we now have a new law that we have to notify the person who sprayed within 24 hours, and then we have to notify them within 30 days, I'm sorry, of the incident. And then they have the option of coming out and like looking at the damage. So we have to give them that option. We notified within 24 hours. We also met with the applicator and with the farmer in person and realized we weren't getting anywhere. So we had to keep taking it to the next level. So get the State Department of Ag. They were very, important in this process to help us get the evidence we need and get the samples done. We did have a very positive experience with the South Dakota Department of Ag in 2017. I can't say that was the same in 2018, but in 2017, it was pretty good. Civil actions, just to keep in mind, they are expensive, they're lengthy, they're emotionally draining, they can be very stressful, it can be very ostracizing for your family, and it can be very scary at times. We had death threats, we had people driving by our farm throwing chemical bottles and trash in our front yard. Thank goodness that we had videos that caught them and they got busted. That was, the sign said, you're on video, you're on camera. So I don't know why you do that. Anyway, yeah, they got fined. But, get an experienced legal team. And that's hard to find too, because like Jared said, a lot of the smaller towns, they have conflict of interest because they know everybody or they represented everybody. So sometimes you have to go to like a larger firm in a larger city where there's a less chance that there's a conflict of interest. But we went through 18 law firms before we found one to take our case. It took us 1 year of trying to get someone to take our case before we found a firm to take it. So you have to stay persistent, and having a good support team, having, whoever is your emotional rah-rah team, you're going to need one if you decide to push all the way through. And then, like Jared said, having a good prevention plan. So Jared, I mentioned you a lot because a lot of things you mentioned, I'm also mentioning, but have a good prevention plan. Signage all around your property. Windsock. We actually have windsocks on 2 sides of our property, visible by the road. So when the sprayers are driving on the road, they can see the direction that the windsock is blowing. We register with Driftwatch every year. We have cameras now on all sides of our property, and you can get these really awesome game cams that have a 200-foot or 300-foot, sensitivity range on them. And so we have these really nice game cams that are hooked up to Wi-Fi and hooked up to you can also hook them up to like satellite now, and they notify you on your phone. Those things are amazing. I don't think I put them in this, but you should see the quality of the video we captured from the sprayers. It's incredible how detailed it is, that HD. I mean, these cameras today are amazing. So I recommend they're not, you can get them like $100 and you can put them on your property. And that also helps you for just collecting evidence in case something ever does happen. We have a weather station on our farm. And then, of course, notifications. We notify our neighbors every year in a letter that we're continuing our organic certification. So I recommend doing this even if you notified them once that you were organic. Do it every year and just say, hey, by the way, I'm renewing my organic certification this year. So as part of your renewal process, just send all the letters out to your neighbors, letting them know you're renewing your organic certification. And then we also put an ad in the paper, in the local paper, just letting everyone know that we are organic and here's our boundaries, here's our legal description, here's where we're located. These are our pictures of our farm and our boundaries. So we probably go more than what most people do, but we just want to make sure that there's no accident. Like people, oh, I didn't know that you were organic. We also notify the county. That's part of our notification strategy every spring. And then we just a good daily activity log, and I can't speak enough to good paperwork. So all of these things, we keep copies of it all, and we keep it in our binder, and we make that part of our good paperwork strategy, because what really saved us is the fact that we had really good paperwork. And 5 years worth, they subpoenaed 5 years of our certification paperwork. And so we were able to show them sales receipts, all of our sales logs. Mosa was able to help us provide them that information as well. And so all of that information put together kind of helped us with demonstrating what our damages were, just because in organic, you have to keep paperwork, but this is where having good paperwork really pays off. And then just understanding the legal fact. The EPA label is the law. And if you go to the EPA website, you can see that it's plainly states that the EPA label is the law. And so that's enforceable. And so if somebody violates that law, then they violated the law. And that's what I kept telling everybody. It was really hard for people to see that. I was like, no, they violated the law. The label is the law. And I told it to everybody. That was like the word, my phrase of the day. I don't care what the judge said. I don't care what people said. I just kept saying, no, the EPA label is the law. I even had to remind the EPA of that a few times, that the label is the law. Okay. And eventually everybody kind of sunk in that, oh, we should probably read the labels for some of these chemicals. And so once I got copies of all the labels and we started going through them and the attorneys started going through them, and they're like, wow, there's a lot of fine print in here. And there is. And the liability, who is liable, is on that label. If you ever read it, it'll tell you who's liable. Whoever it states in there, whether it's the farmer or the applicator or the landowner, if it states that on the label, those people are liable. And so they are the ones who are liable for the damages. And so if all of them are mentioned, then you go after all of them. But there's a lot of information on those labels, and it's important to, once you find out what chemicals are sprayed, to read those labels. Okay, next slide. Oh, that was my last one. Okay. So if anybody has any questions.
Okay, we
thank you. Yeah,
have
thank you so much. Oh yeah, you're gonna read the chat, Harriet?
questions in the chat. There was one about there's a link to that Germinator article, and I just went on, and it looks like you can't get to an archive. You have to be a member.
Oh, okay. I'll
Means-
see if we can do something about that. I might have to contact NPSES and see what we can do about that. It's a great article.
Yeah, there's no, so I can't.
Okay, okay.
Because you can only see the most recent issue.
Okay.
Unless you're a member. Guess you
Sorry about that.
Northern Plains. Um, Also, somebody wrote in about checking out about pesticide residues and the NOP guidance on tracker.org, but I couldn't get that. It looks like that's not functioning yet. It's some kind of pilot program, so I don't know, Noreen, if that's available to the public. Um, Another question was maybe OFA could put together a list of lawyers who work on drift issues. I guess one thing, since both of you are from South Dakota, people need to know that every state, that it's not a federal law. I mean, the EPA is a federal, what the label says as far as how you use pesticides, but the way pesticide drift is dealt with is different in every state. And so some states are somewhat better than others. I know Kansas is pretty bad when it comes to drift on people. Wisconsin, where I am, is, I guess, more progressive. There is a state statute that pesticides are not allowed to move beyond the property line. So if somebody drifts on you, they've already broken the law. But getting, the insurance companies, they take a long class in insurance school on how to avoid any payouts. So every which way, right? Both of you had a long drawn out, they can figure out those things. One thing that I would like to also bring up is that if you're working with a bank lender, I know other people have, their lenders have been somewhat helpful in writing, that the value of your crop and how hard you've worked to, obtain and maintain organic certification and that sort of thing, and help with any kind of losses you're trying to get reimbursed, that they'll kind of stand behind you on that too. And their CETAs is somewhat objective. And obviously in the chat, some compassion for what both of you have gone through. It is not something,
I can add
to me,
one comment to Harriet whenever you get a chance. I can add on to something that you mentioned.
Go ahead.
So you sparked something when you said something important, and that is when there's two different things that go out simultaneously in these investigations. One of them is that they broke the law and someone in the State Department of Ag needs to pursue that and issue a fine if it's, if it's needed. But that's just one aspect of it. Then there's the civil side of it, which is a whole different thing. And I will tell you that there has been civil cases that have been won, even though the applicator was found to do nothing wrong. And there's been cases lost, civil cases lost, when the applicator was fined and found that he broke the law. True story. So they are two very different processes that run side by side. And just because they didn't find the applicator guilty of breaking the law doesn't mean you don't have a case. Okay, I just want to emphasize that because in 2017, the applicator was found and was cited. And in 2018, the applicator was not cited. And we still were awarded our losses.
Thank you for sharing, Angela. Amy, it looked like you had a question to ask.
Yeah, I was just curious. Well, I think maybe you answered it after I typed it, but how did you figure out what pesticides exactly were sprayed on you? Was it talking to the applicator and the neighbor and they gave you the actual, because you said you went and looked at the labels and everything, or was it through the testing that you figured out what was sprayed?
I'll let Jared start first. Jared, did you get a copy? Did you request copies of the labels and they provided them?
Yeah, I think if I remember right, frankly, I've tried to black most of it out. And also before I answer, Angela referenced me a lot, but when it happened to me, I had known of her experiences and had called her for advice. And so I think without the advice Angela had given me, I wouldn't have had the strong case that I did. She gave all that advice that she just gave now, um, and helped me figure out all that sort of documentation that needed to be done. Um, but as far as figuring out what chemicals were sprayed, um, so the first step was to call the applicator, the county in this situation, and they told me, I can't remember, two or three different chemicals. Um, but then I went through the state process of reporting the incident. And South Dakota state law, the applicator has to inform the state. They have to fill out information and provide their logs of what they were using. And so the chemicals I was told at first were not any of the chemicals they used. Um, so I don't know if that was trying to misdirect me to look for different modes of action on the plants because they weren't in the same class. Um, and so legally, if you are going through reporting it to the state, the applicator, at least in South Dakota, will have to provide what chemicals they used, what sort of concentrations, um, all of that information. And so then that's how I was able to uh, figure out what was really there. Because when you send out things for testing, uh, you could just say test for everything, but that would probably be 10 years of your income because you have to test for each chemical, and they're so specific, even if they're related to each other, there's slight differences. So that's yeah, that was yeah, that that process there. Yep. And like
Yeah.
Angela said, those labels, that'll give you a lot of direction for what was wrong. In our case, they were arguing the wind wasn't strong. They were right. The wind was actually too weak. There's a sweet spot window. I think it's 3 to 10 miles an hour that they're allowed to spray in. Um, and we were on one of those completely still days with inversions where the chemical's not going anywhere. It's just sitting around hanging in the air, waiting to get a slight push a little bit later. So it's complicated stuff for
Yeah.
sure, but there's information. So yeah, sorry, I went on and on, but thanks for the question.
Oh, I came late, but I was curious if either of you, if you shared, Jared, like what was it, dicamba or some other kind of, so I know that one's been very drift prone. And to be clear, I'm an attorney with Center for Food Safety, and we sue EPA a lot over approvals of pesticide products. So, I mean, we hear all the time EPA say, oh, we assume everyone's following the label, but we've actually won in court with the label being too long and confusing and basically impossible to follow on the wind speeds and all that kind of weather restrictions. So yeah, this falsehood that everybody's reading and following the label, which is the law, and that's my mantra too, Angela. Labels the
Yeah,
law.
in our case, it was not dicamba to be honest, Amy. It wasn't dicamba, but it was restricted use pesticides that you are not able to purchase at your local Walmart. They were very, very hazardous and they were not applied according to the label. And they were mixed in concentrations and with other chemicals that were not wise to do. And because of that, it made the chemicals much more toxic it had like a toxic cloud effect because the amounts and what they call special brew was not a recommended mixture and so it was just a really unfortunate situation that happened. It goes to show you that if you need to have professionals doing this work. And if they are not licensed and properly trained, which is important because we also, in our case, I can't go into all the aspects it would take. I would literally need a 7-hour documentary on this, but we just kept uncovering one thing after another, Amy, that was so wrong. That was so wrong. I mean, just one classic example, the applicator was flying out of the Vermilion airport with no insurance, no evidence of insurance. The airport had never checked their insurance since they first registered. There was issues with the plane. There was issues with the owner. The pilot was hired on a 1099. He had no experience, or he had experience, but no recent training, no proper training. It really highlighted a broken system, just like the Germinator article said. I mean, we went after a broken system, and people were just shocked at all the things we found. And as a result, it made things better in South Dakota. But um, it's not every citizen, not every person, not every farmer would know how to do that, right? They wouldn't know like how the system works and what to check for. I mean, we went after training records. We wanted to see what training the pilots had. Why did they mix it in these concentrations? What happened? And so as a result, we found a lot of failures. And hopefully, yeah, it won't happen again in our county.
Well, thank you both for sharing so much. I really appreciate it. And are you willing to share with us your contacts so we could potentially ask you further questions in the future?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Add mine into the chat there.
And I guess I would just also like to add that, all you've said about, kind of also prepare, having cameras, but even just going to the local airport and giving them your map and saying, this is where I am, and having no spray agreements with your county and your local township and your utility companies, because they'll want to spray under the electric lines, and just let them know. And then the other thing is, we've been hearing this a lot at OFA, that organic farmers face kind of some prejudice against their activities. And so I'm not really sure if, some kind of field day. I mean, we found here in Southwest Wisconsin, where Organic Valley is located, and we have the most organic farmers of any congressional district in the United States, that it's taken time. But once other farmers see that you're just a farmer just like them, you just do things a little differently, that this kind of a feeling that, well, you're the other, or you deserve it because you don't do it the way they do it, or whatever. But you work just as hard as they do, and you're not necessarily saying, I mean, to me, it's just like, just keep it on your side of the fence. But if you want to learn another way, you can come to our field day. And we found, I used to work for Organic Valley, we found when we had our very early field days that all the neighbors came, and it really made a big difference. That they just had a better understanding that it wasn't some kind of wild, radical way of farming. If anything, if they had a grandfather, then they remember this way granddad used to do it. So anyway, I mean, we all have to work within our communities, both local, regional, state, federal. And the other thing is, out actually on the West Coast in California, Oregon, Washington, they have very strict pesticide rules, and there's very little drift that goes on because there's so many specialty crops there, a lot of tree fruits and such, there that are very expensive. So when there is a drift incidence, it's there's a lot of loss of investment of the victim of the drift. So I don't, somebody says I'm in Oregon. Amy, you said you were in Oregon. Is that right? There are some pretty strict rules there.
Yeah, I think it's better. I mean, you're right. There are, like, especially in the Willamette Valley, we have a lot of, seed crops and a lot of, specialty. I love that they call produce in the food we actually eat specialty crops. But I mean, we do have a pretty bad right to farm law that has blocked people who've been sprayed on, drifted on, especially from forestry as opposed to ag, from getting recovery. So there is that unfortunate piece of it, but I think all three states definitely are, but the reporting can always be better and enforcement can always be better, for sure.
Yeah, so this is actually a priority issue for the Organic Farmers Association. We get input. We do a survey every year, just pesticides. And actually right now, I'm in the farm bill put forward by the House, the proposed farm bill. There is something in there about that pesticide manufacturers would not have any liability from the effects of their pesticides on others. I mean, I don't think that takes away those who've used them and it drifted on someone else, but the manufacturer themselves are now looking for liability, which of course should probably tell you something about what they know about the toxicity of what they're selling.
Yeah, there's a lot there of the preemption. Sorry to just jump in, but trying to preempt at the state level anyone from bringing claims against the manufacturer of like failure to warn of hazards. A lot of the folks that have been contracted non-Hodgkin's lymphoma from exposure to glyphosate, and Monsanto has brought that claim all the way up to the Supreme Court. So very soon there's going to be, briefing and hearing on the question of whether that's the law FIFRA itself preempts those kind of claims. It's really been a sad thing to see happening, but there's people fighting back against it for sure.
Yeah, so then that would be the positive thing. We as organic farmers have the answers on how to do it without these chemicals, and as long as we can stay in business and keep growing, then we can be a model of I mean, there's a lot of farmers whose family, there's cancer in the family, down the road, the neighbors or whatever. And there's people out there always looking for something different. So we are the change that we want to see. I was wondering if anyone else had any comments, Greg or Jane or Wendy, Michael.
It looks like we just had a new question. Angela or anyone here, do you know if humidity and heat can cause insecticides and fungicides to travel via vapor? My neighbors do spray early morning and late evening, but I still have some residue if tested.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, it absolutely does. And we actually enlisted the SDSU weather experts at South Dakota State University to be experts in our case. And absolutely, they were able to comment on situations such as that, for sure. Heat index,
And
humidity, temperature inversions, like no wind, like it, yeah. Yep.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, so the more detailed weather you have, better it is. Again, it's collecting, like having all that evidence, like Angela said, as much as you have.
And Wendy's question, how do you keep those on your side of the fence? Well, I could talk about that a lot more too, but it's it's working with your neighbors, like Harriet said. You have to work with area sprayers. You have to be the one to engage your neighbors to understand the law. And now we're in a situation in our farm where all of the applicators call us before they spray and ask, hey, is it okay for us to spray today? That's but we're so glad we got to that point. It was not always like that, but we don't have any issues now. It is possible. We have completely, so there is a good side to all of this sadness. I want anybody who's listening to this thinking, oh my gosh, I'm not going to ever go organic. That is not, I want you to know there's a good side to this and that we have a good ending to our story. And we've reestablished a friendship with our neighbors. We have, even though it costs a lot of our neighbors are transitioning to organic. They've stopped spraying. We've got fields transitioning out of row crops into grasslands. It has transformed our neighborhood. It has transformed our city and our county, and it's made everybody more aware of how we can do things better. And instead of people sitting around blaming us, they've embraced it and said, how can we make this happen? How can we fix this broken system so it doesn't happen to anybody else? So there is a good side to these stories. And if you work hard enough and if you have the message, like Harriet was saying, we had community meetings at the library every 3 months we did, or at least once a year, we would have community meetings at the library and we invited everybody to come. And I mediated those meetings between everybody. And we had such great community outpouring and people just coming together saying, let's work together. And so there is a happy ending to this story in that we haven't had a single drift or pesticide residue issue since this all happened. Like it's over and we're able to farm completely free of any fear of this happening again.
So there wasn't the one last question about if it moves by vapor, what are your suggestions? How do you, I guess, the bigger the buffer on the other side of the fence, or I mean, it really depends so much, and they keep changing. I think there is something that they could cost them a little bit more, but they can add something to what they're spraying that makes it heavier, so it can't move as far and drift. So there's little things like that.
Yeah.
But you have to first have a good relationship so you can talk about it. Plus, I mean, you can say to them too, you're paying for this pesticide, and if it's over on my fence, it's not over where you want it. What if you can just keep it, you're paying for it, you should have it over there. We don't want it over here. Because that means something. If it's drifting onto your property, it means it's not there where they had hoped to put it. And it's not cheap either.
There's something wrong if it's drifting on your property. I'm sorry, it was since 2018, we haven't had a single positive pesticide residue test. And they've sprayed up to our fence line. I have pictures of the sprayer like coming up, and it doesn't get past our buffer strip. Like it's working. If they follow the label and they know the conditions, you won't have a problem on your farm.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for being here again, Angela and Jared, and thank you everyone for joining today. We are just about at time. So again, thank you all for being here. And if you registered, we will send this recording out to you as soon as it's finished processing. So with that, we'll conclude today's webinar. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks.